This is a hot hand mini, a shorter form pod episode where Geoff and I dive deep into a single topic. Also, we don't have to do any editing, which is really nice. So this is even more raw and unfiltered than our normal podcasts, which are already raw and unfiltered. It's obvious what this episode is going to be about. Jalen Brunson goes down with an ankle injury against the Los Angeles Lakers late in the game as they were fighting with the Lakers in crunch time of a game that they were winning the entire way up until the end. Obviously, we hope Brunson recovers quickly and gets back to full health as soon as possible, as we would for any player. But for the Knicks, particularly with Thibs at the helm, Brunson, at least in the eyes of many, oftentimes seems disproportionately necessary for the offense to function whatsoever. So there's a lot to talk about as far as like how this is going to impact the Knicks. We don't know how long Brunson will be out. He could be out 2 weeks. He could be out 6 weeks. We're not going to necessarily speculate, but we're going to talk a little bit about what we think the Knicks should do and will do in the absence of one of their most important players, arguably their most important player, but definitely their most important player when it comes to scoring buckets at the end of games, Jalen Brunson. So where do you want to start with this, Geoff? What there's so many directions we could go to begin with, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, there really are. And you covered, not covered, but you sort of touched on a number of them. And I'm so glad that you said that, we want to talk about, we don't know what the injury news is. And maybe there are things that will age poorly regarding assumptions we make. But one thing we should make clear is anything that we say, there is an underlying knowledge from both of us, and I assume anyone who listens to this, that if Brunson was ruled out for the season next week, the Knicks season is essentially over. They're not winning a championship without Jalen Brunson. So when XJ and I say things like, "Oh, this will be optimal for them going forward. This is things they should do," I hope nobody out there takes it like, "Oh, they could be better without Jalen Brunson," or there are things that they could do to improve. It's like, no, at the end of the day, they need Jalen Brunson to be the head of the snake. That's a good thing. It's a good thing to have a guy like Jalen Brunson as the head of the snake. I see a couple opportunities to come out of this. A very smart person once said that adversity creates opportunity and character is formed when things are the most difficult. This is going to be an incredibly difficult situation for the Knicks. But I see a couple opportunities here. Do you feel the same, XJ, or do you think it's just a situation where it's just they just got to grind it out and wait until Brunson gets back, and then it's just all return to the status quo when Brunson comes back?
It's tough. I mean, I think there's some element to both, honestly. I definitely think there are some things they can learn and implement and that we can see, and you and I have been at the forefront of talking about using the season as an opportunity to experiment and try different configurations and try different things so that when you get to a playoff dynamic, you have so many different options. You can diversify your offensive approach, your defensive approach for that matter. So there's so many things that they haven't done this season, and partially that is because they've been so healthy and that they've been able to just run out the same lineup 2,000 possessions over the course of the season, which is by far the most in the NBA. So I don't think that's been good for them, especially in a long-term outlook perspective. But I also think that there's only so much they're going to be able to do without Jalen Brunson, and when he comes back, while I don't think things should be status quo, we've talked about many different ways, and we will, I'm sure, now talk about many different ways that they should and could diversify their offense, even with Brunson in the helm. When he comes back, I expect it to go back to how it has been over the last couple of years with him. So
Yeah, I do too. And man, we process things so similarly and our outlook so similar because what you said about the Knicks' health and how that's been a blessing and a curse. I have to be honest, sometimes I feel that way for the Knicks about Jalen Brunson. And that's gonna sound crazy and maybe insensitive given it's been 12 hours since the injury. So I guess I should state the obvious. Jalen Brunson is an amazing basketball player, especially offensively. But and I know the defensive numbers, some of the metrics don't love, but like he gives the effort defensively. But he's an amazing basketball player. He's a wizard with the basketball. I genuinely don't know if I've ever seen someone so consistently able to create a good possession out of nothing. He's like the perfect star to lead an offense coached by this coach. And that's a good thing. That's obviously a really good thing. You want your best player to correlate with the philosophy and the schemes of your coach. But I think we're kind of seeing how it can maybe be a bad thing too. Because Jalen Brunson's brilliance, his ability to like turn dust into diamonds, has convinced the powers that be on the Knicks that the way they scheme offense is good enough. Like, why run a wide array of plays? Why risk turnovers with intricate sets that invite a lot of moving parts? Jalen can just create an advantage without that stuff, And that, to me, what that does is it gaslights analysts into thinking that the only way to swim offensively in this system is to create your own shot. It's why Thibs loved Randall so much, because Randall could draw two to the ball in any situation. That's what his superpower was. But some guys, some even great offensive players, aren't natural advantage creators, at least not in neutral settings like isolation or pick and roll. And this problem only gets exacerbated when the spacing is so clearly low on the totem pole. Because now not only are you asking guys like Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, guys who aren't natural initiators of offense the way that Jalen Brunson is, you're asking them to create offense in disadvantageous situations, or at least maybe neutral spacing environments where a help defender is already pre-rotated off of Josh Hart or Precious Achiuwa into the driving lanes. So what happens? What happens there? Well, exactly what we saw last night. Jalen Brunson has to put the team on his back. He's got to create advantage after advantage, only to find those advantages quickly closed off by help defenders. And the result is him having to take a lot of tough shots while Karl Anthony Towns barely gets a touch in the fourth quarter overtime. Mikal Bridges shoots 6 times in 43 minutes. It's like this bizarre self-fulfilling prophecy where Jalen Brunson has to do anything. Has to do everything. But he can't. The Knicks, we've said it before, the Knicks, I know people probably get sick of us patting ourselves on the back and being like, oh, we've been saying this all along. But one thing we have been saying from the get-go is that the Knicks, or any team, they win a championship with all the pieces being the maximal versions of themselves. And this offense is not purporting a system where all these players are the maximal versions of themselves. And it just doesn't have to be this way. There's so much low-hanging fruit for the Knicks to grab. Karl Anthony Towns at center is one of the most valuable offensive players in the league. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby have both thrived offensively in supporting roles. These are opinions, these are not opinions, they're facts. They're absolute facts. Josh Hart may bring certain spacing concerns that we probably talk about way too much, but he's physical, he's intelligent, he's a great connective passer, he's an amazing finisher at the rim. If he's your fifth option, XJ, you should not just be doing fine. You should be doing great. And guess what? If Josh Hart in a certain game, a certain matchup, is spacing is hurting you more than it usually does, well, you have an amazing plan B in Deuce McBride. Amazing one. 45% or whatever on catch and shoot threes at this point. It should be impossible for the team's offense to be this schemable and this exploitable against smart teams. And honestly, the only way I can think for this offense to be as schemable and exploitable as it's been against the great teams is if your offense gets reduced to, or if your offensive strategy gets reduced to matchup hunting and isolation. Then you'll see all these guys' offensive impacts crater. And that's what we're seeing. The Knicks actually are 26th in offense since the All-Star break. That should be impossible. And so I just said, that adversity creates opportunity. And as much as this sucks and as much as this might be a doomsday for Knicks fans and for the Knicks staff, this is an opportunity for the Knicks. It's an opportunity for them to seek answers beyond Jalen Brunson's advantage creation, to use these games to instill more egalitarian principles that leverage space and movement and make the offense easier for everyone to flourish. And maybe when Jalen Brunson returns, he'll return to something that is greater, that maybe asks a little less of him.
Yeah, I that's all obviously really, really well said. And I agree with the vast majority of that perspective. I don't think Jalen Brunson's coming back to a situation where it's going to be a more egalitarian offense, and he kind of fits in, and things are much different than how they have been. But that would be definitely be the dream. I think, to touch on a few things that you talked about, like when we talk about players being the optimal versions of themselves, we talk about whether they're being maximized. What we mean by that is players can make a maximal impact on the game when the role that they're in is best suited for their skill sets and abilities, and obviously for the time that they're on the court. But that includes things like energy level, that includes things like rotation patterns, that includes things like who are the teammates that you're on the court with. All those things play into whether that player, and each player can be the most optimal version of themselves and have their maximal personal impact that they're able to on the game. And you and I talked about this in our last episode. You asked the question, what Nick is currently being maximized? Like, you posited campaign, which funnily enough, he's probably going to now move to a position where a situation where he's not being optimized, with Jalen Brunson now, which is fair. Obviously, it's a huge hole to fill, but the issue with that is that just Jalen Brunson himself hasn't even been optimized because of the spacing environment that he's been in. The one place where you and I kind of diverge, at least like a little bit, I think, to varying degrees, is that I think one sort of quote unquote advantage creator, one person who conducts the offense, known as like a heliocentric offensive player, I think that is sufficient to drive a really elite offense. And I think it has to be one of the elite players at doing that, a Luka Doncic, a guy like that. For me, I'm watching the Lakers and I'm like, this is a tangential point, but it's like, get the ball out of Austin Reeves' hands, give it to Luka. I don't want to see, like, when Luka and Austin Reeves are on the court together, I don't want to see Austin Reeves with the ball, which puts him in a situation where he's not being maximized because he's best when he has the ball in his hands. But for the Knicks, I don't know. I just think that Jalen Brunson can do all these things. And if you're going to ask him to put the team on his back, you have to make it as easy as possible for him with a maximal spacing environment. And you have to make it as easy as possible for his teammates to have their maximal impact on the game. And for them to do that, there has to be spacing. There has to be strong and good passing lanes for Jalen Brunson to make kickouts to them. They have to be able to attack closeouts and be put in advantageous positions to be able to score the basketball, to be able to make plays in an easier environment, maybe 4-on-3s, maybe, again, situations where they're attacking closeouts and their defender is not perfectly suited to be able to contest them and guard them all the way to the rim. So I just don't think we see that enough. And in my opinion, that's why Jalen Brunson is so good that he's able to overcome that. Like, he's able to score anyway. He's able to do all this stuff that we see. He's such a unique player in that he doesn't want to get to the rim anyway. He wants to get to the short mid range. He wants to get between 6 and 9 feet. That's where he wants to go. And so, maybe if the spacing's not great, there's a rim protector there. It doesn't really matter because he's not trying to go that far anyway. He's getting to his spot and he's going to score. So he's able to overcome those things. I think that the Knicks will have to do more as far as coming up with a more fluid, egalitarian offense without Jalen Brunson. I think it will work. The Knicks are plus 9.6 points without per 100 without Jalen Brunson on the court. Obviously, that's mostly non-starter minutes, which is at the beginning and ends of halves. But at the same time, I do think that's reflective of the skill set of the team and in juxtaposition with how they're being deployed with Jalen Brunson on the court. So I think an optimized Knicks team with Jalen Brunson would be dramatically better than an optimized Knicks team without Jalen Brunson. Wouldn't even be close. But a poorly optimized team with Jalen Brunson versus an optimized team without Jalen Brunson, that's going to be a more comparable conversation. And I think that's probably what we're going to see with the Knicks taking more threes, with there being more ball movement involved, with guys like Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart being more involved in the action in terms of their responsibility as creators, with more Deuce McBride minutes. So I think we're just going to see everyone's going to be surprised at the idea that like, wow, the Knicks are playing really well. How are they doing this without Jalen Brunson? It's just because they've honestly just been suppressed with Jalen Brunson on the court so far. So without him, they may look comparably better if that suppression is not happening. So I think those are some of the things that I expect to see. But yeah, I love what you said, and like I said, I agree with most of it.
It is interesting how Jalen Brunson sits, and like sometimes you'll see these little glimmers of ball movement and more threes with Deuce and Payne, and it's like, how is this happening? And this goes back to the whole like Brunson's brilliance is a good and a bad thing, because it's great that he can single handedly create offense like they want him to. But when they don't have that, then they have to fall back on things like ball movement and spacing and 3-point shooting. And
Geoff, the biggest difference, the biggest difference in terms of one player on or off the court, in terms of the Knicks 3-point frequency, in terms of their attempts as a percentage of their shots, the player who is on the court that results in the lowest 3-point frequency, Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
I would love to talk more with you, not on the show, but I would love to talk more with you about the idea of a heliocentric offense, because I do think we diverge. You know, you brought up the Lakers aspect of it, and I just think there's, and I have no way of proving this, so I'm sure it won't satiate you, which is fine. But you know, you say like, oh, I don't want to see Austin Reeves touching the ball, but like, there are things like that are almost incalculable, like rhythm and the human element of this is a guy who has spent his whole life with the ball in his hands and feeling in rhythm and touching the ball consistently. And you're basically like, sorry, dude, we have this guy who can run the offense every time. You just got to like kind of stand and move around. And
Oh, I don't think that's ideal. I just think that he's in an unfortunate position for himself and for him. Like he's going to be difficult to optimize regardless. Like that's what I think. I don't think it's like, yeah, let's have Austin Reeves and change his role to make him like, 60% of Austin Reeves. That would be weird. Like there would be no point of having Austin Reeves. But my point is, if I could trade Austin Reeves and get somebody else who is able to complement Luka better, I would do that.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So that brings me to my second point. I think too, if there's merit to your point, which I think there is, you're an incredibly smart person, and you're never just saying something that's baseless. I truthfully believe that if you're going to run an offense that way, that is mostly around one person driving the offense and trying to find that balance of scoring and and spraying the ball around. I think you need a more skilled passer than Jalen Brunson, and probably just a taller person who can see all of the angles, who can make these next passes, who can make these skip passes. You know, I think specifically to run that type of offense, you need a LeBron James, James Harden, Luka Doncic, LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Halliburton. And this isn't to say these players are better than Jalen Brunson. I think that the especially guys like Ball and Halliburton, the superpower that Brunson has that they don't necessarily have. Well, two things. I think it's off-ball movement, off-ball shooting, and then it's just one-on-one scoring in these times when the ceiling for offense lowers. Jalen Brunson's output and his efficiency and his effectiveness kind of just stagnate, which is why he's so valuable in the playoffs, because we see these offensive ratings kind of plummet, and Jalen Brunson's effectiveness doesn't plummet. But the question is that enough to get them to the top? And that's sort of the hypothesis that I have, is that while Jalen Brunson is a brilliant player, the way they play offense, even if they did optimize a heliocentric offense, well, no, I don't want to say that. Especially the way they're playing offense right now, I just don't think it's enough. I think they'd have to catch a lot of fortunate breaks in terms of opponent shooting, their shooting in these rare moments to even really truthfully contend. I think they just need more. I think we've seen that. I think, last year, I know their offense, if you just sort by team offensive rating in the playoffs, looked good, but like and they had injuries to deal with. I don't think it would have. I don't know. Do you think they had enough last year if they were healthy? What do you think about that?
Enough last year to do what?
To win a championship if they stayed healthy.
No, I don't think they would get past Boston with what they had last year, but also they didn't have Karl-Anthony Towns. So to me, that's the biggest difference. So if I generally agree with you. I think that when we're talking about, I'm sorry to everyone, Knicks fans, everyone. We're talking about Luka Doncic and we're talking about Jalen Brunson. These are two different conversations. So if we're talking about Luka Doncic, and I would trade Austin Reeves for Malik Beasley instantly, and I think the Lakers get better. Like I'm super super confident in that. But this is not Luka Doncic. This is Jalen Brunson. So obviously different skill set, especially, and you pointed to the ways in terms of the passing ability, the passing versatility, the ability to make every pass and make every read and see the entire court all at the same time, over the top of the defense, like eyes in the back of his head. Those are unique gifts for, a handful of players in the history of the league. And those are not the specific unique gifts that Jalen Brunson has, even though I think he's a underrated passer and has become an underrated passer, especially how he was passing earlier in the season. But I think when you have Karl Anthony Towns, it changes the entire equation. And that's because if you play, and this has been the contention of the entire season, if you play Deuce McBride in Josh Hart's position, now you have 5 very strong to elite shooters all around the court. Now, again, Jalen Brunson doesn't need to get all the way to the rim. And that also allows you to do very interesting things in terms of your spacing, your positioning, a lot of things that you can do as long as each of those guys is able to knock down threes at a very high rate, and they all are, as long as we're not talking about Mikal Bridges above the break. And especially with Karl Anthony Towns' ability to deep space and make shots from way above the key, in my opinion, that puts Jalen Brunson in a situation where he is optimized in terms of his ability to score. And we know teams bring 2 to try to stop Jalen Brunson consistently, especially at the ends of games, but they do it consistently. I think that kind of offense driven by Jalen Brunson is enough to win a championship, to beat the Celtics, to beat the Cavaliers, to potentially beat the Oklahoma City Thunder. I think that offense is that good. Obviously, you're talking about benches and other kinds of things that come into play, but in that specific paradigm where you have Karl Anthony Towns as your 5, in my opinion, the best big man shooter in the history of the NBA, that changes things to a very significant degree.
What's interesting is that, you brought up benches, and the Knicks bench would also get better if Josh Hart was their 6th man.
Yeah, that's true.
He would be his best self. I thought that was one of the best things that Thibodeau did in the Lakers game. I don't know if you noticed, but Josh Hart played all of the non-Brunson minutes, and there he was. They're like, the Knicks did fine in those minutes, and
playing with Payne, Shamet, Towns, and either OG
Deuce.
or Deuce.
No, and Deuce, yeah. And pushing the ball, and there it is. Another thing we've broached the subject of, well, if you do have Josh Hart with these starters, you gotta get him in the active action more. Like, that's the best way to mitigate the way defenses, or at least the smart defenses, want to try to pre-rotate, exploit his non-shooting, which was glaring in last night's game. But one thing we haven't talked about that is, okay, that's what you have to do. That's the smart thing you have to do. But by doing that, you're saying that you can't use Towns as the screener. And Brunson Towns pick and rolls have been one of the most efficient offensive option in the game. And you're basically saying, we can't do that anymore because we have to have this guy out there, and he can't be a spacer. So these are all things that they need to try to learn about themselves going forward. And if they try to, mix in multiple new lineups, maybe see that without Brunson, this glaring lack of space is more harmful because they don't have a guy who can create offense in a shoebox anymore. They just don't have that. I'm with you. I don't know how confident I am that we're going to see it, but I remain firm that this is an opportunity for the Knicks, and there is a world where Jalen Brunson comes back to a team that fits his skill set better and will allow him to, we talked about it on the last episode. Jalen Brunson is just another Knick right now whose overall impact has been muted relative to what we've seen at his best. And there's a world where, as crazy as this might sound to Knicks fans, there's a world where Jalen Brunson can be even better. And it's not his fault. It's not his doing. He needs to be put in a better situation to thrive, where his teammates can also be better versions of themselves.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I expect Josh Hart to be involved in actions more, to be on the ball more, and so I think regardless of who starts for Jalen Brunson, whether it be Deuce McBride, who I think should start, I think you think should start, Campaign, who I think will start, or Tyler Kolek, who could start in the future potentially. Any of those guys would be very strong off the ball players. So I think regardless of who starts in place of Jalen Brunson, we're going to see more Josh Hart creation, which I think will lead to a more efficient offense, because if you put the big on Josh Hart and he's either the pick and roll ball handler or the pick and roll man, now you're not having that advantage that you used to have when he was spotted up in the corner, and the big is just camped out in the paint waiting for any driver. So I think that we'll see some of that be a factor in why the Knicks offense will continue to be good. And I think obviously, Jalen Brunson tries very hard, but if you're replacing Jalen Brunson with Deuce McBride, let's say, your defense is completely different now. You don't have the same weaknesses, and whoever you were trying to hide Jalen Brunson on before, you could hide someone else on. You have a great point of attack defense. I mean, think about your defense now. If your 1 through 4 are Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, and OG Anunoby. I mean, yeah. We're talking about, unless you have like a huge wing, like a jumbo wing that's like a Jason Tatum, we can switch 1 through 4 and no problem, and you're just not getting anywhere. Now, will the Knicks do it? I don't know, but there's a lot that they can do defensively that they couldn't do with Jalen Brunson, and then there's a lot that they probably will do offensively that they wouldn't do with Jalen Brunson. And so, to me, all of that leads towards they're probably going to be better than people expect.
Yeah, I think they'll be better than people expect, and I think that I think they're being slept on a little bit by everybody, almost. I mean, they're 8-point underdogs in LA tonight again. I mean, the Clippers have struggled.
Well, it's a back-to-back on an overtime game. So
it is. I mean, I think that's 5-6 points more than what the line would have been if Jalen Brunson was healthy.
Wow, that's great. I trust your read on that, because I have no idea about the lines, but yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, they were 4.5-point dogs against the Lakers on the first night of a back-to-back, or excuse me, 2.5. The line closed at 2.5. The Lakers are, so even just doing that math, I mean, I think the Lakers are a couple points better than the Clippers at this point. Even Kawhi is playing though, but anyways. That is one thing that we are in lockstep on. I'd be surprised. The TNT postgame show, they said, I don't think the Knicks are going to win a single game on this West Coast trip. That could be right. That could end up happening. That would surprise me a lot. That
would surprise me, dude.
Yeah, I think they're going to come out and they're going to find. That's something Thibodeau's always been good at, is especially when his best players miss time and his best players are offensive engines like Derrick Rose in the way long ago, or Jalen Brunson or Julius Randle. He leans into defense, which is his bread and butter, and I expect them to lean into defense with this. You brought up Deuce not starting. We joked about it last night, how the strategy last year when Mitchell Robinson got hurt was to keep Hartenstein in his familiar role by going from Jericho Sims being out of the rotation to only playing against starters, which is it's okay, so yeah, you're not good enough to play. You're not good enough to play, but oh god, our starting center got hurt, so you're just going to play 6 minutes a half and you're only going to play starters. And then this other guy whose career high minutes per game is 24 minutes is going to play the next 18 minutes straight. That was the rotation strategy.
This other guy who is a top 10 center in the NBA also, who I just happen to have on my bench. I just got a top 10 guy. He's just chilling there as a backup. No, we're going to keep him as a backup. We're good.
Yeah. So I actually could see a world where he, like you said, wants to keep Deuce and Payne in their familiar roles and starts Kolek, which is just mind-blowing to me. it just seems so obvious to start Deuce, but I guess we'll cross that bridge as analysts when we get there in 10 hours or whatever it is.
Yeah. I totally agree. I mean, we'll see. It'll be very interesting what direction Thibs goes, especially on the back to back. Not that he necessarily changes his coaching approach for that reason, but yeah, a lot to see. We're gonna find out more information about this Brunson injury, and Knicks fans may be able to take a big sigh of relief. Who knows if it's a minor, less significant sprain than it seemed. But yeah, I think this was good. I think it was nice to kind of get out our initial thoughts, and we're curious what you all think. If you want to drop a comment about something that we talked about here or something that we missed, especially if it's something that we missed, that would be really helpful. But otherwise, yeah, Geoff, any last thoughts that you want to get out there?
No, just thoughts with Brunson. Hopefully he's good. He's just so reliant on his amazing footwork and his quickness, and you just hope that it's nothing too serious because in spite of what seemed to be the overwhelming narrative about last night's game, which is that Jalen Brunson's unwatchable. It's like
That's a
crazy,
whole
man.
nother
It was
subject.
legitimately one of the best basketball games of the season. Like in terms of intensity, and it just had a playoff vibe. And you check the internet, and it's this game sucks. Luka and Brunson, it's a flop off, and shit, man. Just don't watch. Like I just, yeah.
uh,
I hope Brunson's good. That's my prevailing thought.
Yeah, obviously, I agree with you. All Knicks fans agree with you. All NBA fans agree with you. All people who just care about human decency agree with you. And hopefully,
So
Jalen
Draymond
Brunson's.
Green doesn't agree with me.
So Draymond Green is probably the person who doesn't agree with you. Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. That's a correct call. All right. Well, like I said, drop a comment. Let us know what we missed, what you agree with, what you disagree with. We'd love to hear it. We respond to every single comment. Appreciate you watching the video all the way to the end. That is awesome for the YouTube algorithm, as we talk about sometimes. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't yet. And for Geoff, and I'm XJ, this has been a Hot Hand Mini.